What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking to OpenSesame about how to better predict and detect LLM hallucinations, making more reliable AI. They've got a solution to help do just this, and they've got an interesting story of how it came to be. Welcome to the show, Jay and Anthony. Why don't we give you guys each a chance to introduce yourselves, explain your role at OpenSesame, and then we'll talk a little bit about how you guys got here.
Thanks, Mike. My name is Anthony. I'm the CEO of OpenSesame. Originally, I'm from Montreal. Sort of met Jay a while back through the AI slash Toronto, the Montreal slash Toronto AI ecosystems, and yeah, we met through Next again in real life, and then we just started OpenSesame a few months ago.
Yeah, okay. Hey everyone, my name is Jay. I'm the CPO of OpenSesame. So basically, like Anthony said, I was actually the co-president of one of the largest AI associations in Toronto. So it was an undergrad association in University of Toronto. And what we were doing is we were getting a lot of these schools to compete in like a machine learning competition that we had. So through the McGill team, who actually won the machine learning competition that year, that's where I heard about Anthony for the first time. And that's when we had connected off the line. We both kind of applied to this program called Next 36 around the same time. And then that's where we met in person. So that's where the story kind of started.
So the story really started around Next 36. Can you explain a little bit about what Next 36 is, just so people understand where or why that's relevant to how you guys met?
Yeah, so Next 36 is one of the programs offered by Next Canada, which is like this accelerator program here, based in Toronto. We have offices in Montreal as well. Essentially, what they do is that they take like 36 people every year, they ship us to Toronto, and we just build.
So you just start working on something. And
Yeah.
so you guys had kind of crossed paths a bunch of times before. It sounds like you were pretty active in the startup and AI scene. Were you guys founders previous to this, or is there things that you were doing previous to this in the AI space that made you, so active in this community that led you to Next 36? Or tell us a little bit about your backgrounds.
Yeah, I mean, I can start off here. So I think for us in specific, we're both technical founders, right? So that's why there's like we're both
That's
like
like a unicorn. Double
yeah.
double technical co-founders is rare.
Yeah. So we both loved technology. We loved AI. We used to speak about AI a lot. And like I think in our perspective, we both are previous founders, so we actually understood the market and how like companies were using AI on a daily basis. So I was selling to, one of the largest public school networks in Canada. I had an ed tech company before this. Anthony was selling to the largest hospital network in Quebec. So that was more or less on the healthcare side. And we both use AI extensively. So I think that's where we kind of started running into the problem of hallucinations because like on my side as well, like teachers wanted content that was very accurate according to what syllabus they were using, and they wanted content to match each new update to the syllabus, which was hard because we were using like different techniques like RAG, but it didn't really work out as it should have. So that's when I started looking into the problem a little bit more, and then when I met Anthony, that's when we started speaking about it.
Anthony, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, on my end, like Jay said, my previous company I was selling software to a bunch of hospitals in Montreal. And originally it was like not really AI based, but then one of the heads of departments like came to me. He was like, "Hey, like we've been hearing all this stuff about AI chatbots. Can you make us one?" So I was like, "Okay, well, why not? I'll try it out." Very quickly realized that it was just impossible to do anything like that in a safe way because of all these hallucinations that were happening. And so I sort of thought to myself, like, okay, well, if I'm able to implement payment processing in like 10, 15 minutes with Stripe, why can't I do the same thing with hallucination detection?
So maybe this is a good place to actually talk about that. What can you define what hallucinations are? I think people might have different perspectives, but there's a term that you use there, Jay, which I think we should unpack for listeners in case they're not
Yeah.
familiar with this space, which is RAG, and then also about hallucinations and what that may look like and what it's caused by, I think is an important piece to understand as well.
Yeah. Anthony, you can explain what a hallucination is. I can go into the deeper kind of thing.
Sure. I mean, so there's hallucinations and there's RAG. RAG stands for retrieval augmented generation. Essentially, it's a fancy term that just means like you're giving your AI access to a set of documents. You're telling it, hey, refer back to these documents to answer any questions that I have. And hallucinations essentially just means that the AI is giving you a wrong answer or an answer that you deem as incorrect. That could mean as, something that is wrong based on your own documents, internal documents, or that could mean based on like, factual evidence from web searches or whatnot.
Yeah,
Got
like
it.
this gets worse over time because like I'm pretty sure people have seen these memes that are going around like where it's like, oh, like there was a Google search where someone said like, oh, what is a fruit that ends with, which is and like Google answered like coconut, banana and stuff. So that doesn't like realistically make any sense. It's like kind of fabricated out of thin air. And
Yeah.
a lot of like big figures in the AI space have had like serious worries about where this is going in the next few years.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So the RAG is essentially making it point at something and say, pull information from here. Hallucinations is when, despite that grounding of information or otherwise, the answer retrieved is really not a correct answer. Like it actually makes no sense fundamentally. So it sounds like that's the problem you guys are set out to solve. How did you, I mean, hallucinations probably are a newer thing for most people, right? Even LLMs, it sounds like you guys were sort of in this space well before it started kind of evolving at the pace that it is. And so, where did you see the need for this? It sounds like there was one example at your work, Anthony, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to start a company around it. What was sort of the motivation to solve this, not as a problem for your immediate thing that you're working on or building, but try to solve it at scale?
I think we just both saw the trajectory at which AI was going. I mean, compare today to last year in terms of like the pace of AI, it's ridiculous. And I think both Jay and I have been pretty early in the AI space. I mean, I can talk for myself. I was maybe like 15, 16 years old, attending AI conferences in Montreal. And that's purely because like we're sort of lucky we're like in Canada, the birthplace of AI. You got your Jeffrey Hinton in Toronto, you have Joshua Benjo in Montreal. It's the best place you could build here. So, we found this opportunity and we were in the right place to build it as well within Next, and we got the support from the team and everyone in the community. So it worked out.
Actually, the funny thing is, like, it started in this one room in Next. I think that's when it happened. It was very random because Anthony and I already knew each other before, but I think we just ended up working in the same meeting room. And that was when I was still working on an old startup. He was working on his old startup. And there was like a massive whiteboard to like the left side of us. And he was like, hey, like, did you figure out something to like mitigate the hallucinations that are happening in your product? Like, how are you kind of going about it? And I said, I mean, I'm thinking about a few ways, but I'm not very sure. Like, I've looked at, a bunch of things where it's like guardrails. To keep it simple, that just means like, oh, just giving instructions to make sure that it's working properly, etc. But nothing's really giving me an accurate response because I can't really tell where it's happening. So that was like the main point that I had an issue with, which is I didn't know where it was happening. And I didn't know how to kind of anticipate, oh, it's going to happen over here. So we just started kind of hashing out a few like solutions on the whiteboard. And within like the first 6, 7 hours, I was like, okay, this is like what I want to do for the next like decade of my life. Like I knew it at an instant, which was very weird because I haven't got that feeling with the last company I was in. So it was just at an instant where I felt like, okay, fine, this is what I want to do. Also, Anthony asked me a very weird question. He was like, "Oh, do you really want to speak to teachers for the next 5 years of your life?" And I was like, no, not really, because I didn't want to, right? I think it really depends on like your ideal customer, and that's the most important part into coming into a space which you're actually interested in.
So at the beginning, it sounds like you were actually both working on something completely different. You were bringing your technical skills to solve problems. Was that maybe the first jump at entrepreneurship and startups that you guys were involved in? And, you know, this is the second, so maybe it makes a little bit more sense because you're talking about how that problem came to be. But what sparked becoming an entrepreneur or building a startup for each of you? It sounds like you got some technical background, but that doesn't mean you're going to start a startup. That's a very different style and approach to what you do with your time and energy. What was it for you guys?
I mean, I wanted to be in control of like my time and what I had, and I think the biggest thing for me was having an impact on other people. That was like the biggest thing. For me, I don't feel like you can have as much as an impact when you work a 9 to 5 or you're in a corporate space. But I think for us, It was more or less like, okay, I want to, with what I'm building right now, this should leave an impact for, the next generation, etc. Like they should refer back to this and take that inspiration forward. That is something I feel like I have control in right now, as well as I started like a bit earlier. Like I think my first got an itch when I was like reselling sneakers. So I was actually born and brought up in Dubai. Like I wasn't based in Toronto. I moved to Toronto after like university, which is when I came to UFT. But like I was reselling sneakers in Dubai. I think that's where I got the itch. I was like, oh, I'm just making money in like an instant. This is fun. Like I want to keep doing this. So I think that was kind of like where the itch started. And then as I went forward with school and uni, I knew this is what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a similar story for me. Um, I was sort of raised on, the Discovery Channel, how it's made, Dragon's Den, Shark Tank, all that stuff. And so obviously that sparked some interest for me. Um, and I guess like it all sort of started in when I was pretty young. I mean, I started like robotics when I was like 7 years old, and I just thought to myself, okay, I can build this stuff, but what if I could sell it? And so I was just like, when I was just a kid, I was like pitched to my parents, like, okay, imagine this robot does this XYZ, whatever. Um, and then I just turned that into a nonprofit that I was a part of in high school, then a bunch of other projects in the future, and then after working at a couple of other startups afterwards, I thought to myself like, yeah, well, this is what I want to do. I will be bored out of my mind in a corporate environment. I can't do it.
So instead, you guys are now embarking on this journey to help detect hallucinations. Can you tell us a little bit about, maybe give us the pitch on what OpenSesame is and start to talk a little bit about how that would work or what ways this solution starts to actually solve that problem?
Yeah. If you,
Okay,
okay,
I'll
go
take
ahead.
it. Yeah, essentially, in the simplest way possible, yeah, OpenSesame is the easiest way for any business to detect and control AI hallucinations. Point blank, that's what it is. We make it super easy. Literally, it's 3 minutes to implement. It's a little package that you download. You import it. You change your large language model provider client with ours, and then all that's doing is that's intercepting all the calls that you're making to AI, and then you're extracting all the valuable information from those calls, and then you're populating your dashboard in real time with the full breakdown of information, what's going on, what went right, what went wrong, and what you can do on your end to improve the reliability of your AI over time.
Yeah, I think that the main part of the platform as a whole is like we wanted to kind of focus on the non-technical ICP as well. A lot of these companies start off with like dev tooling tools that are just focusing on very technical people. It becomes quite hard for the data to be processed down into a business environment. So, for example, if you're a part of a product team and you're working on implementing a solution, because if you look at it from the top, right, like Gen AI is like hallucinations are a very big bottleneck for like mass Gen AI adoption because a lot of businesses who are like interested in the AI field, they want to implement Gen AI, becomes harder over time when the risk gets higher. So for us, we wanted to kind of translate the data that's collected by our platform into like an easier, digestible way where, these other businesses can just like understand the data and then implement the insights that come from the data to make the product better. So that's kind of the realm we're in.
So help me understand this a little bit. Why is it that there's something Open Sesame can do that the average company can't? And similarly, it sounds like it's detecting, but it's not preventing the hallucination. It's flagging. Is that correct?
Mm. Yeah. So right now it is flagging the information. So
Okay.
right now we're working on a post-processing approach because the latency is something we're looking at as like a bigger standpoint. So for example, like a company wouldn't want latency when they're changing the output and giving it back to the user. So we're just focusing on detecting it as a flag, saying that, hey, this was a hallucination over here. You might want to check that. And right now, like our algorithm is very important because that kind of helps the user find ungrounded truth documents. So in the aspect, for example, like remember, Mike, you mentioned that a lot of things that a GPT said should be grounded in reality. So if a user asks a question or like a business gets asked a question that is not like been aware of. Like it has no knowledge of that previous answer. We should be able to find out the ungrounded truth to refer back to for the user to get the correct answer. So right now what we're doing is, since it's a post-processing approach, it's just like flagging the hallucination, giving them data on why it happened. But right now we're working on more of an end-to-end thing where they have the option to change it on the output, but the latency might get slightly affected. So we still have to work that out before it goes public.
Yeah, which is actually interesting from a product perspective. Like you, at the end of the day, sit behind whatever the end solution someone's building is. So in some way, they might even be able to toggle it, which is like, hey, I know that this might be a bit slower, but I want very clear data. Toggle no hallucinations or hallucination guard or whatever you want to brand it. Maybe I'm helping co-build your product here, but it feels like that's something that the end company that's using Open Sesame could be applying. Now, without getting into all of the secrets, what can you tell us about how this works or why it may be hard for the average company or out of sort of the need for them to be solving individually and wanting to solve this at scale?
I think the main bottleneck for a lot of companies is just focus, right? When we're looking at the landscape, we spoke to a lot of companies that were experiencing these hallucinations, and they told me of, they told us of like they had to hire whole teams of developers just to try to solve this issue of like, um, you know, working months to build a internal suite of tools just to mitigate these errors. And for us, we're like, okay, well, your job should not to be to do that. Like, you should not be spending $500,000, months of time just to build this stuff. Your job should be to do what you're actually set out to do. And that's what we thought to ourselves, like, okay, well, we should be able to provide those companies with an easy plug and play solution. And like how it works, I mean, obviously you have the whole flow of how we detect that something is a hallucination. So we just analyze the output. We see which parts are grounded, which parts aren't. And then we have an algorithm that does each branch, right? So okay, we compare to the ground truth documents that you have, or we compare to what's available on the web. Yeah.
And
That
like
makes
we kind of like tested this fun embed, which is actually live on our website right now, so it's opensesame.dev. But that embed is basically like in like an AI fact checker. So if you get any response from like GPT or any like large language model, you can just copy that information, paste in the embed, and then we'll just like check if it's factually correct and give you the sources of why it isn't or is. So like that's the stuff we're working on, and I think that's what makes it exciting, right? Like trying to figure out how they can focus on what they want to do is just like building better product, and then just we're as like the middle layer between them getting better responses.
I like that. You're allowing companies to focus on what they're trying to build rather than all the other challenges or potential things that you need to be thinking about when building AI solutions. So ultimately, who's your audience here? It sounds like it's people that are builders of the technology, maybe chief product officers, but
Right.
ultimately, who are the people that would purchase Open Sesame or start using and maybe their different audiences?
Yeah, I mean, there's different products for different audiences. Our embed and all that stuff is more for like the B2C space where like let's say you're a student, you're using ChatGPT for school, like everyone, and you want to make sure the answer that it's giving you is correct. You just plug it in. You might pay us $10 a month for the fee to use it unlimited times and go ham. So that's an audience for us, obviously.
Okay.
But the core audience obviously is more like companies, B2B, enterprise, stuff like that. And those are just like people who typically work in industries that are very much like very regulated and just can't afford to make any mistake. So in the case of like hospitals, for example, they would love to use AI, but an error could mean that the patient loses their life. A law firm might want to use AI, but they might get sued, stuff like that. So it's high risk for them to use AI, but they really want to.
Yeah, and it's like it's worse for cases where like a lot of the site has like customer facing chatbots. So if they kind of integrate and they use GPT, for example, like GM had this thing where someone had bought like a $76,000 like Chevrolet Tahoe for fucking $1, just $1. So that was like a very weird like instance of how like a hallucination can affect a business very heavily, in fact. Because imagine paying $1 for a $76,000 car
Yeah, I'm
just
looking
because
for
of
the
an AI.
URL right now.
Yeah, we literally posted about that, saying that if you wanted to buy a car for $1, you probably could if you just checked, GM's chatbot. So I think that was something where we started seeing these memes, which are just made as memes, but it became very serious over a period of time for each industry. And that was our initial strategy, like target the high risk industries first and see if the product works really well over there. So people who are using it in little slightly lower risk industries and still want to check if their product is hallucinating, could still use a product like sector agnostically. So that's why like healthcare, legal tech, fintech was like these are the industries we try to focus on first before coming down into the other ones.
Got it. And what I like about it is that you're trying to help enable people to continue down the path of AI and not be scared of getting something wrong. You're adding an additional layer in there that helps ease their mind into things because it's like any innovation, right? People are, skeptical that AI will provide the wrong answer. There's lots of parts of a business that don't work every day, tons, and that provide wrong answers. So I think what you're doing is you're building a tool that's helping mitigate that risk, assess and evaluate, get ahead of it, action it, which is pretty cool because it says keep going and innovating. Now, are the ways in which this integrates, does it work just with native built solutions? Does it work with low code solutions as well? Like I know a lot of people build AI solutions with something like Copilot Studio connected to data sources. Does it work within there or does it have to be hard coded into some custom built application?
So
Yeah, I
currently,
mean, go ahead. Sorry. No, go ahead, go ahead. Go ahead.
currently it works with hard-coded applications. So anyone who actually builds with, any model provider, whether that's OpenAI, Gemini, Anthropic, essentially all of them, Hugging Face today we added. Um, they can use OpenAI. Sorry, they can use OpenSesame and yeah. But for low code solutions, we're yet to implement the platform for it, but step by step, right?
Theoretically, it can because all of those low code solutions are
Obviously, yeah.
hooking into those same LLM models. It's just about getting you as a gate in between there in a effective way. But it sounds like you're starting with those working on pro code. If we're gonna kind of
Exactly.
title it something
Yeah.
today.
I think our intention is to kind of make this like a no code hallucination detection tool. So that's like the direction it should go into, where it's just like the user has to enter like right now they're entering just a single line of code, but we want to kind of alleviate that entire process as well and just like click a few buttons, get things connected into your vector database or whatever you're using at the time, and then just start detecting hallucinations. That's how we want to position it. But I think also it depends on like how the audience is changing over a period of time, right? Because like a lot of startups are coming up very quickly. So we kind of want to see where the market is at and how they're responding and then go into that direction completely. Because right now we've had some great experiences with like a lot of startups that are just like building with LLMs. So right now we want to make the product as diverse as possible. Like Anthony said, like we have a lot of model providers that we're, providing support to. We added Grok, Anthropic, and like Hugging Face today on the platform. So we're just trying to give them more freedom in the choices that they have.
Yeah, so I mean you mentioned it a few times, but I think it's worth just kind of hitting it on the head. Which models does this work with today, and are there anywhere it doesn't, but are sort of something you're working towards?
So right now we have OpenAI, Gemini, Anthropic, Grok, Hugging Face, and Cohere. So those are the models that we're working with right now.
Okay,
Like, but we
so
will add like as newer models come out. I think Anthony, we discussed like making the package like model agnostic as well. So that's something you want to work on.
I think essentially right now we're at like 95% coverage at this point, so
yeah.
should be good for most cases.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
you're good for where you're at, which maybe that's the right next question, which is where are you guys at in this journey? From Next 36 to, this product that you're developing that sounds like some people are using. Where are you at in the journey and what does the year ahead have in store for you guys?
So what can we say? So right now we raised our first check a month and a half ago.
Okay.
Thank you, comma. And we're raising our pre-seed round in the next month. And then that'll really help us like push the product even more. We're going into Jay, can we say what we're going into?
I think keep it a secret for now.
Keep it a
There's some
secret.
exciting stuff, but like, yeah, I think
Stay
we're
tuned. Stay
yeah,
tuned.
we're trying to kind of go into a space where we haven't seen the other companies go into. So, I mean, I can say the name of the operation. It's called Operation Picasso, but there's no like specific focus on like saying what we're doing yet. So I think that is something that people would have to stay tuned for. But I think as we go on, I think making the platform much easier to use. Right now, when we started off, it was like a simple API. Realized that the API was not something that people wanted because they had to plug it into different parts of the product. So right now we switched to a package. It's like very model agnostic right now. So people are just getting easier to use. And the more easy it is to use, I think that's how the product will evolve. Right now, also, I think an important part of where we're going is building a very strong community. So
Okay.
and when we look at it from the Toronto side, right? Like if you look at SF, there's so many builders doing so many good things, but in Toronto, it's like kind of died down over a few period of years. And like Anthony said, like Toronto is the only place we want to build a startup over like, this period of time because there's so much resources here. People are very smart. We get great access to talent over here, as well as like you're building in the literal birthplace of AI. People don't really seem to really understand that, but I think because everyone rushes to SF as soon as they get, an investor coming on board, for us it's different because we want to make sure that we're contributing back to the ecosystem on a very high level as well. We just started hosting like monthly events. So our next event is like on September 3rd. Like we're hosting like big events with like 100 people that are coming in with like bigger partners, for example, like VoiceFlow and a couple of other companies that are, big into the Toronto ecosystem. So we're just trying to give back to the community both ways. I think that's very important.
Got it. And these are like technical events so that you're bringing like the more of a technical community together in that space or something else?
So it's not technical. Like we have a theme normally. So the first event we have was like strictly for developers. So we were just like building in the dev tooling community over there. The one on third is just like a B2B founders event. So if you're selling to B2B at any time, like you can come and attend the event. And we have a couple of like great people that are flying in from SF as well to like kind of
Wow.
present to these people. So like that's kind of like the structure we're going for.
Where does that fit into what you guys are doing? Is it truly just about giving back? Do you see it as like core to what you're trying to build here? I think it's very valuable that you are reinvesting in this ecosystem. It is so different in so many ways. I feel like maybe the best way to describe it is the not just Toronto, but maybe Canada feels like it's a bit more decentralized, and there's people definitely trying to create gravity of bringing those people together and hoping that people don't escape orbit to just to your point when they get that first check leave to San Fran. Like there's almost the why, like why not stay here and keep building here and reinvesting in the ecosystem? Like what's the rush to leave? And I know it's a complex issue and there's tons of layers, but it sounds like you're trying to be that source of gravity um, for the community.
Yeah, I think part of it comes from, I mean, obviously community is a huge part of the of what we want to build towards, but also like it's part of the brand, right? I think a lot of startups these days neglect their brand. They go head on product or customer acquisition and all of that, but I think they miss the mark on brand because ultimately in this age of AI where everything is like much easier to build and replicate, the only thing that's actually going to get people to stick with your platform is how connected you feel with it. And so if we put more emphasis on the brands, then people feel like they're almost like part of a family. And so if and I guess when a competitor comes on board and starts building in Canada, our customers won't instantly switch out. Obviously, if they have a better product, then that's our fault. But if it's a copycat, then they won't just switch. They'll stick with us because they know that they maybe they met us in person at one of our events or they were involved in some way, shape, or form in our Discord community, for example.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of what we're building towards.
Yeah, and I think like Anthony and I in general as people, we realize like with our older companies that community is a big aspect of like how the product iterates over a period of time. I think that's like the main important point because when we look at it right now, you meet people at these events, you show like demos of what you're working on initially. There are like big feedback cues that you can get as a reaction from the audience, or when you talk to a couple of people who are probably because Anthony and I are very technical. We might not be the best developers in the world. That's why we have AI engineers that are hired on our team. But like we understand exactly how the iteration cycle should work. When you get feedback, you just go back to the drawing board and quickly iterate so you can get something that they actually want back onto the market. So I think getting these feedback cycles through these events are also very important for us to kind of build and like iterate on the product at a much stronger standpoint than like a competitor would, for example.
That's a really good point. Which, funny enough, talking about the iteration, evolution, one of the questions I love to ask, I'm not sitting on it, by the way, but if I was sitting on $100,000 to give Open Sesame today, what would you both be investing that into right now, and where you're at in the journey?
I think focus is just on getting more engineers, a bigger team of engineers involved. I think that's the biggest mode that we can have. And that's, I think, the advantage that we have versus a lot of the other players in this field that are in the States. I mean, we're essentially the only ones in Canada that are building in this sort of sector, and that gives us a huge advantage because we're the only ones that have access to these talented engineers from Waterloo, U of T, McGill, who are extremely talented but maybe don't want to move to the States. And so that's, I think, the biggest advantage that we can take into account, and what we would use the 100K with.
And I also think like foundationally, I think Operation Picasso is like something we don't want to give away too much about, but I think like in specific, I think the research part of it is really important as well, right? Like building the team not only based on the decisions you're taking with development, but also the decisions you're taking based on research. I think that's a big pillar that we want to build out in the company. Not at this moment in time because we're very focused on product right now and we have great people around us, but I think right now, as the company gets a little bit larger, research is a big thing that we have to take into account because how these new models are coming out, every 2, 3 months, etc. How are agentic workflows like coming into this thing where one AI is talking to the other? Like, where does the product fit in that space? So I think that is something that we have to definitely look towards, and I think that money would also be spent towards that.
So, I mean, you're obviously building a solution for AI. And I think we've probably used the word AI at least 30 times by now. Is there a way that AI helps change, or maybe it'll disrupt what you're bringing to market? It'll embed itself within the actual way that the solution works? Or is it naturally already there because you're building with AI for AI? I'm curious how you guys think about that.
What do you mean by embed itself within the solution?
Like, I think when you're like, where, and maybe it's more automation than AI, but where or how does AI potentially disrupt what you're building? Like, you're building this for people that are building generative AI solutions naturally. And so they are trying to disrupt their own industries. Does AI have a way that it makes it into what you are building, or that it disrupts what you're building?
I think there is significant research on something called like LLM as a judge, which is essentially like it's a model judging another model and like
Yeah.
essentially checking whether or not it was correct. You do face the same issues of like, well, what if the judge actually hallucinates?
Okay.
Um,
It's just like layers.
it's layers on top of layers, and then eventually you get into the problem where it might not be economically viable to have all these layers of AI on top of each other. Um,
It
you know,
sounds like
like
that Spider-Man meme, right? Where they're all pointing at each
ex-
other in
Yeah,
a circle.
exactly
yeah,
right,
yeah.
exactly right. And then, well, as time goes on, you see more and more compute getting invested into AI, and there's significant energy requirements for all of that.
Yeah.
Does it make environmental sense? Does it make economic sense to just pour in trillions of dollars into compute? We'll see. We'll see.
So on your journey so far, you guys have obviously had a bunch of great experiences. Is there anything that's like a standout moment for you so far as you've been building Open Sesame?
I think the first customer was like a standout for me. That was like a big moment. I was like, oh shit, like it's finally like, moving into the right direction. I think that validation perspective was also good. But I also think that the iteration cycle was something we learned for like very quickly. So in our previous companies, I think I personally, I speak for myself, not for Anthony, but I think I took more time because I was very scared of pushing out a solution that someone would have a negative reaction towards. So I think as Open Sesame was built, it was always like we're building one component every 3-4 days and then just shipping it out to a customer. Because the best part about the product and like where we were at Next was like we were always surrounded by our ideal customers. There were like a bunch of AI startups around us all the time. So we had to literally just leave a meeting room, put our laptop in front of them and say, hey, does this work or not? Like, are you interested in using this? Do you like it? And then go back to the drawing board. So I think that was something that I really enjoyed. That was the sort of moment that like, and I love working with Anthony for that reason.
That's cool. Yeah. So like the rapid iteration, but it's funny. It's like, I think no matter who you ask, almost 9 out of 10 of the startups that I've ever talked to is like the first paying customer. Like sometimes it's irrationally so, like they made like their first $10 of revenue and they went and bought dinner and beers and spent like $400, but it was just that much of a celebratory confirmation of what they were building. So it's cool that hits for you guys too. Um, I think I wanted to ask a question about this earlier, but I don't want to leave without asking it, which is, I know it's not what you're building, which is OpenSesame, but do you have any thoughts on how we can continue to create that vibrant ecosystem here in Toronto and keep companies working here and lifting each other up versus sort of working in pockets and silos? Do you have some thoughts on that?
I
I
mean,
know Anthony has a bunch of thoughts on this because we discussed it, but yeah, I think I should let him go first and then I can chime in.
I think I mean a major mistake that happened was just like Collision leaving Toronto.
Yeah.
I think I don't know how that could even, you know, why that would happen. I get it. They might like, I don't know, they have to do some cuts and whatever, but I don't know. Besides that, I think Toronto's on the right path. I mean, I think this year, Toronto has the Toronto Waterloo sort of area has more developers than SF, I think.
Yeah.
I did not know
And
that.
so, yeah, I mean, you can have a bunch of events and hacker houses and essentially replicate a lot of what SF is good at, and then just bring that here. Um,
Also,
yeah,
the major part of it is like the benefits that you're getting. If you're doing like shed credits, or you're getting these grants back from the government. If you're building here, it's very beneficial to keep your runway for a longer period of time. Logically speaking, if you set up your company here, you would get more benefits than building in SF in that perspective. But also, I think Anthony's right. Like we're talking to this company. Like I know the founder, so his name's Hardeep, and he basically builds these hacker houses like all over the world. So they want to do something in Toronto, and we want to help them like bring that vision here. And just build a hacker house where people can just like build on something they actually care about for 4 months of their life, and then just actually go out and like talk to people, be around people that are building all the time. I think that's like a big vision to kind of bring that ecosystem feel here. Because I feel like, genuinely speaking, like startups here are lazier than they are in SF, like much lazier. Like out of the people we've met, sometimes like it comes across like they're not as quick, they don't want to iterate as fast. So I think that is like a major shift in mindset when it goes from like SF to Toronto. So that has to change as well.
It's really interesting. It'll be cool to see, and I'm excited to jump into one of those events. I got to figure out the timing. September 3rd might work. But
Yeah,
if not,
for
I'd
sure.
definitely love to come to the next one. And I know even the Pitch Please team and network are working on some things, because I think it's so important to figure out how to connect the dots of people trying to do this and at least get us into one room working on something, or at least talking about and hanging out together as a step in the right direction. And I've got someone coming on in a short bit onto the podcast that's super passionate about building a Canadian unicorn and keeping it, Canadian owned the entire time. And so I'm excited to have him on to talk about that in just a few days. And then we'll be hopefully getting that one out in October. But it's a very important piece. As we sort of wrap up here, I think it's important to understand, are there any things that you need from the community for anyone listening? And, the audience listening could be very broad. It could be someone that maybe wants to jump in on that pre-seed round. It could be someone that wants to use your product. But if there was like one thing that you had to crystallize into, which is like, what help could people give you right now to help you move faster? What would that be?
I think so I think if you're a talented engineer, just reach out. I think that's always like a thing that we like to kind of have a discussion about. If you're like talented and you're very passionate about what you do, just reach out to us. Maybe it could work, specifically. a lot of AI engineers in the space that are very talented. One that we actually reached out, very funny story actually. So Anthony had posted this on LinkedIn saying like, there was a meme, I think, and it was, Anthony, what was the meme and how did Rajat reach out to you? I think it was just like some post that
Yeah, it was like this thing I saw on Twitter where this guy that told a potential employer like, "Hey, I will like you can use my body as a vessel to product market fit and like all that stuff." So I was like, "Yeah, that's the type of person we kind of want to hire, where they would do like the same as us, like just like work our butts off just to reach that point of product market fit." And so I posted on LinkedIn and very quickly got a lot of really quality um applicants, and then one of them we ended up hiring.
Amazing.
Um, yeah, I think broader on a in a broader perspective, like if you're remotely interested in AI hallucinations or Gen AI, get in touch with us. We'd love to have the conversation. If you're a business that uses AI and is having trouble with hallucinations, go on OpenSesame.dev. Everything's there. Get in touch with us. We can book a call anytime.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I think we're definitely happy about like building in Toronto. I think the community is really important to us. So the more people that are a part of that, it can help us build the ecosystem as well. That's very valuable to us as well. I mean, like shout out to Braden and Reem from Voice Flow as well as like the next community, like our past two events were hosted over there. But like the more partners we get, the more like amazing builders that are building in Toronto, that would be great to grow the ecosystem here as well.
All right. So buyers, builders, and people that want to continue to invest in the community, make sure you reach out and get connected. Anthony, Jay, thank you for coming on today. I think this is such an important topic. AI, with the amount of people building solutions that are either AI first or extended by AI, hallucinations is a big piece that I'm sure a lot of people have or should be thinking about. And it's amazing that OpenSesame is trying to solve this at scale and democratize that approach. Any closing thoughts from either of you as we kind of wrap up today?
Anthony, you have any closing thoughts for the
Any
audience?
closing thoughts? Oh, actually, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably interested in entrepreneurship or starting a company or whatnot. Just start. Honestly, just start. The worst thing that could happen is that it doesn't work out. Just, you have to build that muscle, right? You're
Yep.
not gonna start when you're much older. The younger you start, the better. You'll get better, and yeah.
Yeah, I think like I completely agree with Anthony on this. If you have like a shot of an opportunity, just take it. Like don't waste time on it. Like if you want to build something and you have an idea, just start building it today. It's not gonna just get some feedback on it and keep iterating. And I think that's like the motto of how the company is moving as well. So yeah, that's the same advice I'd give.
Just start. Well, you've heard it here on Pitch Please. I think people have heard it hopefully enough times by now. So if you're thinking about it, just get started. It doesn't have to be, don't overthink the end game of where you're going to end up. I think it's like work with what you've got, bounce it off people, start solving it. You don't have to like hoard a bunch of money, quit your job to get started. I think you can get started organically right away. And the most important piece of that is your motivation to do that and take the steps forward one foot in front of the other. Thank you both for coming on the show. Thanks everyone that listened again to the Pitch Please podcast. We look forward to catching you on the next episode. And obviously, if you liked this episode or any of the other ones, make sure to like us, subscribe, share with others, or reach out or tag someone that you think should be on, either as a founder or a resource for founders that are building. Thanks again, and we'll catch you guys all on the next episode.